Before I start this review officially, I just want to let you guys know that I've been sick. I've come down with a really shitty cold, and that's affecting my throat. So if I sound like crap throughout this review, just know it wasn't my fault. Okay, so before I jump into the actual episode, I have said that this season will be great based on the amount of coverage and a lot of people who are negative towards modern Trek actually liking it. And I think this episode solidifies that. I will talk about how later and how this episode is the deciding factor for this season. I think episode 4 and 5 will also improve on the episodes, but so far, this is the best episode so far. Right now, however, let's just watch.
Captain, she's still on us.
Right off the bat, we pick up from the last episode where the Titan is being pursued by the Shrike. They can't warp, so Picard and Riker recommend hiding deeper into the nebula. The score here also evokes horns from the Wrath of Khan.
We lost her.
For now.
The opening establishes that this episode will be very much like the battle between the Enterprise and the Reliant back in the Wrath of Khan. Terry Matalas has stated that a big inspiration for this season of Picard was Crimson Tide, with the difference in command with Picard and Riker, much like Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman, and of course, the most famous submarine movie, The Hunt for Red October. We cut to before. So like before 2009 or like before 2017?
These timelines are so confusing.
We see Riker and Picard in a bar toasting for the newborn son of Captain Riker's Thaddeus. Picard does a wonderful speech that leaves Riker stunned until he was talking about his mother. Oh, Picard. On a side note, the de-aging looks decent. It's not perfect, but it does a decent job showing that this clearly takes place at least 15, maybe 20 years beforehand. Riker then gets real with Picard, talking about how he was nervous, that it took 17 seconds to get to sickbay. Is that why the title is 17 seconds? This is another beautiful Picard and Riker scene, and it can only be written by a true fan. Deanna Troi even pops up for a cameo, and it's really lovely seeing her. Back to the Titan, Captain Shaw wants to see if they can locate the Shrike near them. Now, I haven't talked about this guy, but this particular person has been suspicious since episode 1. He was there addressing Picard and Riker, and he was also the person in control of the transporters. So I think this episode will perhaps flesh out his character. Shaw relieves the bridge crew of a 36-hour shift, and that's a really cool detail, how he's very by the book, but he knows that his crew is important and need rest. Sydney then goes to check up on 7 of 9 to reassure her that what she did was the right thing, and that she understands her. We cut to the medical bay, where we see that Jack is a little protective of his mother as Riker and Picard enter. Picard then speaks to Beverly alone, and to say the conversation is tense is an understatement.
Beverly, you made the choice for me. You don't get to condemn people before the fact.
Picard is clearly hurt by the decision that Beverly made while she justifies her actions, and it is understandable why she did what she did. Picard didn't have a choice in the matter. She made it for him, but she knew that with Picard it would always be dangerous, and she thought that he wouldn't change. Beverly even digs into him about his father, which had always been a touchy subject with Picard ever since The Next Generation.
Don't take my past and use it to justify and rationalize your actions. How dare you take my confiding in you about my father, about my fears, and use it to cut me out of the biggest decision of my life?
With these wide shots and having them on opposite sides show how distant they have become. This is another great and powerful scene and really shows how Terry really gets the characters, and Jonathan Frakes really shows his directing chops in this episode.
As a mother, your whole being is about protecting your child. I thought I could protect mine. I didn't know if I could protect yours.
Riker and Jack are outside waiting, and it's funny seeing Jack be this impatient while Riker smirks. Riker tells him that Picard and Beverly had a very subtle relationship in The Next Generation, which was true. It only became explicit in the final season, the episode Attached, and in the alternate timeline of the final episode where they are divorced.
I heard he's positronic.
He's still the same man.
They reference once again that Picard has a synthetic body, and yeah, it's really stupid. Apparently, he died in season 1, and his consciousness got put into a robot. It's really stupid, and apparently that's a thing. But I get what's happening. They really want to just move on from the crap of the past, and at least make this particular season stand out on its own 2 feet. Jack asks if Riker has any family, and Riker just tells him that he has a wife and a daughter, and he had a son. A great exchange between these two. I know it might seem like there's no criticisms, but to be fair, that's what happens when you have great writing. I don't have much to critique about this season of Picard. It's been so good so far. Beverly explains that Vadic is most likely after Jack to get to Picard, and that they have been after Jack for a while. As Picard leaves, we get this funny exchange.
This accent.
He went to school in London, never shook it. Maybe it's in his DNA.
And then this more tender moment where Jack could have seeked out Picard, but the writers weren't clever enough to implement Picard being a father. I mean, because Terry Matalas was involved. I mean, because he didn't want to. Riker tries to encourage him to talk to Jack.
Jean-Luc, talk to him. Moments with your kids. You never know what you might regret. God knows.
I love that Riker has become as much a wise person as Picard is. He has grown as not just a father, but as a person. The Titan gets hit multiple times, with Shaw being hurt in the process. He transfers all authorization to Riker without a moment's notice. Riker and Picard get into position. Riker gives Picard orders as to what to do in the situation, and Picard instinctually knows.
Thank you, Jean-Luc.
Well, I think it might be time you called me number 1.
We cut to Metalis Angeles, where Raffi wakes up on her ship, as Worf does his warrior dance, I think. There is a reference to First Contact, with the same song being played. As Raffi comes in, Worf just takes her gun, showing her how pretty useless she is. Worf puts her in her place, but acknowledges that she is very much a warrior and that her instincts are correct. They team up to track down the guy who stole the weapons. Cutting back to the Titan, Picard and Riker have a little disagreement as to what the next course of action should be. Riker wants to go a more conservative approach, avoid the strike as much as possible until they can warp, and Picard has suggested that he wants to fire an attack. Vadic now should be as defenseless as they are. We cut back to sickbay, where we see a lot of crewmen are hurt by the attack that just transpired. Shaw goes into shock due to his internal bleeding. Shaw also points out to Jack that Vadic keeps finding them, so he wonders how she is able to do that. They come across an anomaly and the Vulcan advises it would be unwise to go through it. I wonder if that's setting up for like later down the line, maybe next episode. As they are about to escape, Vadic once again catches up to them. She uses the portal weapon seen in the first episode. Ah, so that's how it connects to the Raffi plot. Okay, I can get behind it. Picard recommends fighting back, but Riker orders them to move back into the nebula. Back on Lost Prime,
It is casual.
Seriously, where do you wear that? To a Tuesday beheading?
Worf and Raffi find the person they seek. Worf just fucking slams him. God damn! Like, dude, that is badass.
Beheadings are on Wednesdays.
The Shrike continues to attack the Titan as tension escalates between Picard and Riker. Jack meets with Seven and he asks her if there's anything that could cause them to be detected.
Deuterium. It insulates the warp coils.
Yes! Yes, that's it!
They head off.
Yeah, the thing about that is...
You're insane.
Yeah, but we love him. Seven and Jack discover that they have been sabotaged, informing Riker and Picard. They meet a common ground by using the trail, but they have different ways of using it. Riker wants to use it to divert Vadic to get out of there, while Picard wants to use it as a tactical advantage. Turns out the guy, well, that one was the bad guy after all. We discover that this man isn't all as he seems, as he takes down Jack, exposing him to the poisonous gas. Worf and Raffi interrogate the person who stole the weapons, doing the old good cop, bad cop routine. Raffi assumes that the guy is going through drug withdrawals since she sees him and knows of the symptoms he's experiencing. Jack awakens and has a hallucination. I assume this will be relevant in future episodes, but for the time being, there's this weird branch, there's a red door, and then there's this message saying, "Come find me," or something along those lines. Seven gets Jack to sickbay and informs Picard.
Seven to the bridge. Picard, Jack's injured. I'm taking him to sickbay.
Go.
And much like Riker told the story of his son being the longest 17 seconds of his life, knowing that Picard's son is injured on the verge of dying, Picard experienced the exact feeling of what Riker felt.
It took 17 seconds to get down there. The longest turbolift ride of my life. I thought I was losing him. My unborn son. His whole future flashed in front of my eyes.
And in that moment, you became a father.
That's right.
The music drowns out all the other noise except for the defibrillator. Luckily, Jack is still alive. Again, wonderful scene. Gates and Patrick really act wonderfully just together. I think this is probably the best material each of the actors have been given. While The Next Generation is great, it was very episodic in nature. And while I think episodic stories have their strengths, in terms of weaknesses, the next episode can be completely different to the last episode. The only time, to my knowledge, a storyline was followed up on was after Picard got assimilated by the Borg. He went to his family home.
Chateau.
Yeah, but that was the only time a storyline had such a huge effect on our characters. The strength of this season of Star Trek is that it can follow up on previous episodes and build on an overarching story. We then cut back to Raffi, and the guy admitted he stole the weapons and that he sold them to enemies of Starfleet. He also says that the portal gun was a diversion and that another weapon was stolen. He accidentally reveals his true identity, and Worf asks him a question.
Tell me, how long have you been away from the Great Link?
Ah, okay. I really like where this is heading. For those not in the know,
I'll explain later.
Picard tries telling Riker to attack the Shrike, but Riker isn't having it. Riker's strategies have failed, and I think Picard has merit to what he says, but Riker wants to get the crew back alive and intact. Back to Worf, he realizes that the reason why he was sweating was because he didn't want to reveal his true form in front of them, and that he is a changeling. Same as the person on the Titan. Worf explains the history of the changelings, but I'll give you the summary and a bit more. Essentially, back during the events of Deep Space Nine, the Federation entered a war with the Dominion, which was made up of changelings and their subservient species they created. This lasted around 2 years, and many lives were lost on both sides. Had the Federation lost during the Dominion War, it was projected that 800 billion people would die if they had lost. But thankfully, the Federation was able to win against them, saving those billions of lives. However, Worf states that after the events of the Dominion War, some of the changelings didn't agree with the Federation's terms and were unhappy with it. So, a terrorist group split away from the Great Link. For those wondering, the Great Link is when every changeling reverts to their liquid form and combines sharing everything, thoughts, emotions, experience. This is the foundation of their society. Worf mentions that he was contacted by one of them, a man of great honor, no doubt referring to Odo from Deep Space Nine, a really cool reference. Meanwhile, as Worf explains the current situation with the changelings, the changeling on board the Titan is setting up a bomb. The reason why Starfleet did not say it was this terrorist group that attacked the recruitment center was because it would reignite the Dominion War. Since changelings could change form and impersonate people without people noticing, I am liking where this storyline with Raffi and Worf is going. I think it had a slow start, but man, the episode is now really starting to pick up that storyline. As Riker tries to get to Warp, Seven informs Riker that it was a changeling who did it, but the bomb the changeling set off was the power conduit tied with the ability to warp. With no other options left, Picard tells Riker the only play is to fire everything they have at the Shrike. However, Vadic has a countermeasure for it. The engines of the Titan are failing as they fall towards the gravity well. Riker is pissed and tells Picard to remove himself from the bridge. As we follow the Titan falling through space, we end the episode. Okay, so yeah, this is an awesome episode, and there is no other way of saying it. I don't have many negatives when it comes to this episode. I guess it would be the CG de-aging in the opening, but the scene was well written and well acted, so it never really pulled me out of the scene. If the first two episodes were mainly focused on being character driven, this episode had action and character moments. I mean, another negative I have is swearing in this show. I don't think swearing should be a part of Star Trek. Maybe not as much, but I personally don't like swearing in it. But that's just my view on it. This episode also had awesome ship-on-ship combat, and Vadic was much more reserved than she was in the last episode, definitely showing that she can also do the intimidating reserved villain. What really surprised me was tying this series to Deep Space Nine. I really love that. I think it is a fantastic way of using continuity in the franchise. While Frakes continues to be awesome as Riker, like, I'm gonna shut up and about him acting because he's just fantastic as Riker. I think Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden really give amazing performances this episode. I love their acting in this. Patrick actually gets to show his acting ability in this episode. Gates also shows her amazing range. I get why she was very proud of this season of Star Trek. Like I said before, Raffi's storyline has gotten more interesting, and I think her storyline has kicked into gear. Now, I must stress this enough, that it doesn't excuse that episode 1 and 2, I wasn't really grabbed by her storyline. It was a bit slow. But I think with the inclusion of Worf, it really just elevated that storyline, and I get why they were cutting back to Raffi. I understand that now. Now, what was interesting about this episode was Picard and Riker in particular. I think that it was a deliberate choice by Terry to have these two characters have a role reversal. Riker was very much the impatient, action-heavy character in The Next Generation and even the movies to some extent. Whereas in this show, he takes command, but he is very reserved in nature. However, Picard is very much forward-thinking. He wants to attack. If there is a tactical advantage against the strike, he is going to take it. Whereas Riker is thinking that he has to get his crew home. It's a very clear role reversal of the two characters, and I really dig that. If you are a die-hard Trek fan, then this is the Trek you've been waiting for. Right here. If you're not a fan, I understand the hesitation to jump into it. However, I feel like the show gives enough information as to the events of the previous shows to catch up to speed. Again, I hate to just, praise Terry unconditionally, but he gets Trek at its core. Now, yes, there is some things I would change about it. I would adjust the amount of swearing that there is in the show, and I feel like after this we should go back to a more episodic route. However, I think at its core, this show is just more of the Trek of old, and I love that. I think Terry understands Star Trek, and that's what excites me. That's what excites me about his vision of Star Trek. Now, yes, there are problems with it. It is definitely not Berman-era Trek or the Gene Roddenberry-esque Trek or the movies, but this is the closest we've gotten to Star Trek in a long time. And if this is the future of Trek, and if Terry is involved and spearheads the next generation of Star Trek, I can safely say that Star Trek is in good hands, and I just wish him all the best in the future with all his other opportunities. And if he continues making Trek, then I am all for that. However, next time we'll be looking at the 4th episode of Star Trek, which, from what I gather, concludes the first act of this 10-episode arc. So please check it out next week or as soon as possible. Ring the bell, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will catch you all next time.